America's street team all summer long out at our station events. Come find us and ask us about our Mall of America mystery cards where everyone is a winner. See where we'll be next at KFAN.com. Keyword calendar.
Nordo in for PA 9 to noon. And I've heard via the power trip, Saucy keeps mentioning, and I don't know, is the schedule there directly to your left, Max?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It does. I don't know for a fact yet that the Friday feast is going to be at the Vikings facility. I think it shows that on Friday.
It does indeed say that.
It will be PA and Charge. It will be back together again. It will be first practice on Saturday. I know Saucy and I are going to be out there on Saturday. I can tell you that. Still efforting figuring out the feast, but PA is going to be back with us tomorrow. And that brings us to Vikes Bites. I mean, it's how quickly has this summer gone. Vikes Bites is always brought to you by Thousand Hills Lifetime Grazed Grass-Fed Beef. Thank you, Thousand Hills, not only for elite product. You can shop online. Go to thousandhillslifetimegrazed.com, and then like a box of meat shows up at your doorstep. That's pretty sweet. Or you can go to Coburn's. You can go to your local co-op. They're a Clearwater, Minnesota company, so they're local. Matt and company are such great people, and they support local athletes staying local, too, so I dig that angle. Thousand Hills brings you Vikes Bites. I got an email not too long ago. Let me see exactly what time this was. So, yeah, about 15 minutes ago. And it just has a list. The Vikings announce 38 players have reported for training camp.
Let's go.
I'm not going to list off all 38 names, but you know them. There's no doubt about that. Eventually, the number gets closer to 90, and camp will kick off this weekend. But where are we headed first as we continue to get our way to Vikings training camp via Vikes Bites?
Vikes Bites! Vizzle Bizzles! Well, two of those names on that list, Nordo, perhaps the two most, the names that fans are most interested in, were both signed over the weekends. The Vikings signed both of their first-round picks as training camp begins. J.J. McCarthy and the Vikings reportedly agreed on a 4-year, $21.85 million contract that is fully guaranteed, while Dallas Turner signed a 4-year, $15.7 million contract that includes an $8 million signing bonus and a 5th-year team option.
Yeah, I talked with, I'm trying to think, I think you were with me last Monday, and I talked to Alec Lewis about it. And so there's one side of Nordo that has, at least, and it's, of course, some listeners would disagree. I do have a bit of intelligence, a bit of logic, where Kwesi's going to handle business. This is all going to get taken care of before camp. No worries. They'll report on time. Everything's fine. But you keep seeing, okay, 5 first-rounders have not been signed yet. And then you start kind of creeping your way closer to when pads have to come on and plays have to be made. It's like, well, okay, and then the Rube side of me is getting a little nervous, getting a little sweaty. I'm perspiring, and not just because of my weight. So I was mild, like, just, can we get this thing over with so there's no issues into camp? And it obviously was going to get done, and it did. So I'm thankful for that. When you were mentioning, the two names that people, so not Jaron Hall,
cricket noise,
not KJ Cloyd. What about Jeremy Flax?
Ooh.
All jokes aside, one of my favorite parts of training camp each year is that you will get to know, and maybe it's one of those guys, maybe it's somebody else, Malik Knowles, Tyler Manoa. What about Bo Richter? You're going to get to know one of these guys that you didn't previously know, and by the end of camp, you're hoping he makes the cut. And that's kind of the part that I enjoy about camp, is learning so much in a very short period of time about all these guys. We're going to say goodbye to almost half of them. And ultimately, the 2024 incarnation of the Minnesota Vikings is made. I do want to see the kicker, though. I want to see the Bama kicker. I need to see Will Reichert. I need to see how the leg, you need to hear the pop.
Right.
And I don't know. It depends on how we set things up at camp on Saturday. If we can get some sort of a boom mic next to the tee, I don't know if they'll agree to this. But I'd love to hear I need to hear the contact. Is it a hollow sound? Is it deeper? is their force. You can tell a lot by audio. I want to hear the pop. I want to hear the foot connecting with the ball to really get a good idea of exactly what we're getting out of one Will Reichard.
We need to figure out all the senses when it comes to kicking. We're still very scarred and sensitive when it comes to kicking. So if they got a scratch and sniff, like a smellometer too, the sounds, the sights, the smells, everything. We need all 5 senses on this kicking bit.
There was, and I love, it's one of like the 75 websites that John Bonus runs.
Yeah.
But Zone Coverage does a really good job. We did Nordo's numbers on Mondays after games last year. Tom and those guys, they do terrific work at Zone Coverage. Love it.
Tom's the best.
But I forget who it was. Somebody wrote an article basically trying to show you statistically, starting from Fred Cox in the way back all the way to our current situation, Greg Joseph, Greg the Leg, that those of you that think that the Vikings have historically had issues being clutch, issues getting over the hump from a kicking standpoint, that you're wrong. Oh. Look at all of these years in which we had tremendous success. And I appreciated the statistical work that was being done. None of the stats, none of the advanced metrics, none of the runs. Gary Anderson had a perfect season until he didn't.
Right.
At one point, Blair Walsh, I believe he set a rookie record or something. He had 10 or 12 makes from 50 plus. He may have been perfect from 50 plus his rookie season. That's awesome. Love you, Blair. And I loved you right up until a very cold day in January of 2016. So the statistics are sweet. That's super cool. And earlier that season, by the way, 2015 season, we walked off on the foot of Blair. That does not matter.
Right.
That no longer matters. That in a Rams game that the wind was sweeping through the College Stadium, Mike Zimmer intentionally gave the Rams the ball so that he could take the wind, and ultimately that worked in a walk-off. I think it was like the week before or the week after, you walk off at Soldier Field on the foot of Blair Walsh. It doesn't matter. So you could say, statistically, yes, correct. There are worse situations. You can also say that the Vikings, historically, they're like 6th all time in wins. That's pretty cool.
Right.
But what about this other thing? This other thing that used to take place in January, and we keep pushing it out, and now it's in February, and it might even be longer still in years to come. That Super Bowl thing. That's the problem. So, clutch, certainly. Love you, Fred Cox. What about Fuad Revez in the 90s? Who didn't love Fuad? How could you not? Even if just because the name was cool to say.
It's a great name.
Ryan Longwell, good at golf, terrific in kicking. We've walked off on his foot. Probably should have used or seen Ryan Longwell late in a certain 2009 championship game down in the Bayou. But my goodness, we can't sell the stats.
No.
We are not clutch. And my ability, top of head, just to think of a few, that tells you where Vikings fans' heads are at. So, Will Reichard, scratch and sniff. Statistically, how you are from weeks 1 through 18. And ultimately, that's good.
Doesn't matter.
January, my friend. January is kicking season for the Vikings. Or at least it hasn't been, and it needs to be. Vikes bites!
Vikes bites! Vizzle bizzles! This one seems kind of obvious, but it showed up on ESPN.com. According to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, the Vikings are hoping that quarterback Sam Darnold has a Geno Smith-type impact on the team this season. And I would say, and definitely in more recent memory, that is the go-to kind of story that you would hope that any situation similar to Sam Darnold's would be, is that you can get a Geno Smith-type guy that takes your team to a playoffs and maybe even has a couple more years down the line as a starter.
Well, Geno Smith, that's a terrific example. He emerges from obscurity. Some people wondering, I did not know that he was still in the league. And Russell Wilson goes to Denver. I think Drew Lock goes to Seattle, but then Geno Smith is the one ultimately winning games for him, and they find themselves, did they just miss the playoffs or make the playoffs a couple years ago? I forget. Doesn't matter. But resurgence of career is the A topic for him. He's drafted highly by the Jets. I think his teammate like broke his jaw. Like he got punched in the face by his own teammate in the locker room at one point. And, Gino, this is, us as fans, like we'll laugh at Gino. He's a terrible football player, all of this, but he's a dude. And by all accounts, a nice guy. And Pete Carroll and everybody fell in love with him. And that's a good one. I do like, and he was kind of created this snot-nosed aura around him. But Baker Mayfield,
right,
kind of, he bouncing around. He kind of wills himself out of Cleveland. And then has a cup of coffee with the Rams, and then you see him. He was with one other team too. Was he in Carolina?
Yeah,
behind Sam Darnold.
I think it was Carolina.
And then maybe he went to the Rams. And then, but that's a recent example too. Is what Baker Mayfield was able to do, resurrecting himself with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and similarly, the weapons that Baker Mayfield had in Tampa Bay better than what he had seen for the rest of his career opportunities with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and all of those guys. And now here in Minnesota, Sam Darnold will have the opportunity to do the same thing with Justin Jefferson, Addison, and hopefully TJ Hawkinson when he's healthy. But that'll be when PA gets back tomorrow and all of that. That will be a hot talker as well. How long will Sam Darnold play? That'll be perpetual. Again, it's a thing that we're projecting into the future. Will Nick Mullins actually be QB2? Is it part of this development plan where they just don't want JJ on the field yet? And Nick Mullins is actually your backup QB. And then you have emergency style / not active on game days, JJ McCarthy in that spot. How do they play all of that? We talked about it Friday with Charge. We're going to talk about it tomorrow with PA. And probably talk about it every single day for the rest of our lives until we get an answer. So... any more? You got one or two more, maybe?
I do got one more. The Packers and Jordan Love. Well, Brian Gutekunst, the Packers GM, announced today that Jordan Love will not be practicing until the team him and the team agree to a new deal. He said that Love and his agents let the team know that over the weekend. But Gutekunst does say that he is optimistic the two sides will reach a deal. But for now, no money, no Lovey.
You're serious?
Yeah.
How did I miss that?
It just popped up because it's actually crazy because I was writing up a story from your guy Mike Florio saying something, saying that Jordan Love will practice. He's not going to hold out, but he might hold in, and so on and so forth.
Sure.
And then front page of ESPN. Good thing I checked it. That story just came across the desk at ESPN this morning.
Obviously, I want Jordan Love to regress. I want the running game to be awful. They just re-upped Kenny Clark for another 3 years. I want Kenny to rapidly decline, given his age, because he's just tortured the Vikings his entire career. I remember one time, I'm so dumb. I made this proclamation trying to explain how tough Garrett Bradbury was because he only got thrown aside like a rag doll by Kenny Clark 4 or 5 times in a game. It was, which year was it? It was the Kevin King, was that 2019 when Kirk is driving to win the game. Dalvin Cook had run for a 75-yard TD. Just put Darnell Savage on skates. Team's driving. This is early. It's got to be rookie year, second year, something like that. Whatever season it was. And Kirk just completely implodes the game, frantically throwing. Instead of just we had the clock on our side. It's like 1st and goal at the 8, and instead of either spiking it or just chilling and getting into a huddle, Kirk basically rushes the play and throws it right to Kevin King in the back of the end zone. Kevin King had done nothing in his career except for moments like that when he played the Vikings. But I was trying to make the statement of, wow, Garrett's looking tough. Garrett's looking strong. Like he was just getting worked. Oh, Kenny Clark's awesome.
That was 2019.
It was okay. So I hope all of those things go the wrong way for my least favorite team in the NFL, the neighbors to the east. But I am super interested to see how this money works because really, if you're going to pay to market, then we're talking maybe a $250 million deal, or they go a shorter term deal that has a bunch of guaranteed and kind of plays that, well, we're going to give you 3 years at a higher annual rate versus 5 years and more commitment and time overall. And you still have so few reps to really judge in a long-term capacity. So it worked out for him last year. But the hold in, I wonder if the Green Bay fans worry about that. Are they, is this melodrama to you, or are you just chilling? You're fine. It'll be okay. Everything's great. They'll get it figured out. And in Goody, you trust, which based on the draft and some of the decisions they made, maybe you should trust Goody. So that is interesting. And we'll watch that as it unfolds. We had Sinekin on Friday morning for a bit. We'll get a border battle update surely as things are popping over in Green Bay. That's Vikes Bites by Maxx, brought to you by Thousand Hills Lifetime Grazed Grass-Fed Beef. Thousand Hills LifetimeGrazed.com. It's Nordo in for PA. It's 9 to noon and another cash giveaway opportunity.
Yes, sir. The Fan and BigDeck.com want to give you a shot to put $1,000 in your hand with our national cash contest. Enter the keyword money at KFAN.com now for your shot at winning. That's keyword money. Enter it now at KFAN.com. Join us in the Minnesota Wild for their Block Party series presented by Cub at Cub Foods in Hastings tomorrow. Stop by from 5 to 8 p.m. for fun games for all and KFAN swag. Plus, all proceeds from concessions will be donated to local youth hockey associations. For full details, head over to KFAN.com. Keyword, you guessed it, calendar.
Kind of got a little David Guetta vibe to it, maybe.
It kind of does. I was thinking that same thing. Kind of like mid-2010s hip-hop music.
Maybe a Timbaland produced.
Right. Chance the Rapper.
Timbaland's produced everything, it feels like, for the last 30 years.
He really has. Him, Dre. Now DJ Mustard is the new guy.
DJ Mustard?
DJ Mustard.
DJ Mustard? All right. I dig it. Eric in Circle Pines reminded me of Donald Igwebuike, Vikings kicker. Sports is entertainment. Sports is escape. It's a recreation. It's a hobby. And we at 9 to noon, frankly, it can be an obsession. Specifically fantasy sports. I'm already pumped for LFL to start up as the fantasy hoop season. And we're going to be pumping up training camp every day. Max, you're a big part of this. You love sports.
Yeah, I cannot wait.
We got to figure out this Tennessee Titans thing a little bit, but overall, you're in on Minnesota sports. You're hootie-hooing, the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The shirts will be off for the Vikings.
Were the shirts for sale? Did we set up a hootie-hoo table at the root party?
There was no hootie-hoo table at the root party, unfortunately, but...
Sounds like a missed promotions opportunity.
I didn't say that, Barb. Nordo did.
But we're pumping up training camp. Anthony Edwards is in Paris. Joe Mauer just went to the Hall. And crazy trades, right? In some ways, we live for chaotic times in sports. Part of the entertainment. I believe it was Juvenal, bred in circuses at one point, the Roman Colosseum. And sports is supposed to be that circus in that weird, dramatic environment. Rudy trades a couple of years ago, Parisi and Suter longer than that. Just kind of keeping all of that in your head. But man, the last 2 weekends, Max, real life has actually been stranger than fiction. And a week ago, I didn't really want to get into it, but now after this last weekend, I just can't help it. I mean, the last 2 weekends, summing it up, real life. We're watching WNBA into their little All-Star break, baseball into the All-Star game, home run derby, Teoscar Hernandez. There we go. Thank you. And Scarves Up, Loons won over the weekend. All of that. Twins baseball, lost a couple tough ones to the Brewers. We'll handle that next in news. The last couple of weekends, a former president and leading Republican candidate is shot. So we have an assassination attempt. And by the way, what's up with the investigation? I was on X earlier today. I saw a video. I think it's Kim Cheadle who heads the head of Secret Service, for the first time in 9 days, she had given somewhat of a sham of an interview shortly after the event, and then nothing. There's no investigative updates. The FBI's not talking. We just got to wait until now. I believe she's in front of a committee this morning and apparently not answering many questions. So what's up with that? I mean, it's been 9 days. What do we know about the 20-year-old, Thomas Matthew Crooks? Apparently limited social media or internet fingerprint, and the reports keep coming out. You know, we were talking with Grim during the first hour, the idea of how slowly something builds and then in an instant it happens. And with just information bleeding out slowly over the course of the week. And all of this happens, of course, in lieu of press conferences and people answering questions that the masses have. Kid's walking around, actually looks kind of conspicuous. He's walking around with a rangefinder. The timing of when he was a quote-unquote person of interest. The timing of when he was noticed versus when he was engaged. Early reports, there was a police officer maybe that climbed up on that building in Pennsylvania. And apparently Crooks faced him with the weapon, and he may have fallen off or he hid for cover. Who knows? Somebody knows, actually. That's the point. I don't know, but somebody knows. But you got police sources. You got this hot potato of responsibility right now. Like the Secret Service says they were in charge of that building. The cops say they weren't. They couldn't even spare a police vehicle outside, maybe with the lights on, kind of a small visual deterrence of sorts. I don't know if you saw this, Mac, the sloped roof bit. The guy, Secret Service, Cheadle says that the roof was too sloped for Secret Service snipers to be on top of it. It was a safety issue. But then you also see them on what appears to have even a steeper pitched roof, ultimately dispatching of Crooks. Then you have an Iranian plot. The Iranians. What's up with this? Apparently completely uninvolved. But at the same time, you're seeing what took place. You hear that a few weeks ago. Now, apparently the Iranians they've had Trump and a couple other guys on a list for like 4 years because of Soleimani. He was an Iranian general, and Trump ordered his assassination. But then this new bit comes out a few weeks ago that maybe there was some new intel, something actually potentially taking place. Secret Service has been requested to beef up Trump's security. They have denied said requests. Again, these are all reports. Planning on site. Did the kid have a drone? I've seen ideas of a second shooter. In lieu of information, nothing's off the table. And you see how the social media world exists. Many people will ask questions, and sometimes even more will fill in the blanks themselves. At one point, the dude walked like a mile with his rifle and a ladder that he picked up at a Home Depot or something. But then there's a van that has IED devices. There's a car. The guy who lived like 90 minutes away now has a van, a car, and a Huffy all in the mix in Butler, Pennsylvania at the same time. The leaking of information has really been absurd because regular people like you and I, we may see something and we can latch onto it, but then we don't see 6 or 7 other things while we're still digesting the first thing, and now we're generally confused, and we don't know what to believe. Meanwhile, Kim Cheadle has not had to say a freaking thing for 9 days. Had the one interview, and she may be even speaking to the committee now as we speak for the first time. And again, as I've been seeing on X, not answering a lot of questions. So in lieu of information, you got conspiracy theories. There are a fair number of people out there that don't even believe that former President Trump was even shot, that this was an act, that the gentleman who passed away, the other 2 that were injured, this is all political. Shard of glass from the teleprompter. That's what hit him. Not the round discharge from a AR-15. 226, 223, 556, whatever it was. So there's that. So that's what we were digesting. Max, that's what you and I were too cowardly to, other than we mentioned it a couple of times throughout the show, but didn't really deep dive it. It's insane. You can love the guy, you can hate the guy. I can tell you no matter what, it's not good for the country when people are trying to take these people out.
Yeah.
That's not good for us. So that was just that was a week ago. That feels like an eon ago.
It really does feel like it happened in a whole different year.
The Republicans have their convention. Some of you were watching it in love. Some of you were watching it in hate. I must bring up, there were some MyPillow jokes about the pad on his ear. I laughed.
Yeah. Oh, there was some Nelly Band-Aid jokes saying that was the new Band-Aid.
So, but that's a week ago. Then a week later, President Joe Biden has announced, this was yesterday, he announced he is no longer running for re-election 2024. And, I mean, the overtures, I don't know where people stand on this, but I've seen it like his final selfless act of patriotism. Are we required to speak of national politicians like they're perfectly noble, that they're these unsullied crusaders of protecting democracy? Did Aaron Sorkin write all of this into a West Wing episode? I don't know if you've noticed that, but it just feels a little over the top for my taste personally. But patriot, country over self, amazing man, a champion of the American spirit. Power, certainly. Power and control, certainly not an alluring factor in any of this. Power has never corrupted at any point in time. But, so, well, I guess not your preferred candidate. I mean, the other one, obviously. I mean, mine, the other guy or gal, they're the problem, not the one that you want. But my point is here, no longer mentally fit to run the White House. So we have an assassination attempt one weekend, and the next weekend it is decided that Joe Biden is no longer fit. Now he's fit to run the White House now, I think, is what the conversation is. But he's not fit to do it for another 4 years. So people have been questioning his mental acuity, if we're talking about that, really since he was elected in 2020. And people have talked about for months, right? Like those videos that are out. If you oppose or if you have anything to say about, where he's at, his ability to do the job, that you're an ageist, that viral videos were deep fakes or cheap fakes. So he's voted for by Democrats during their primary process because Biden's fine. Biden's stronger than ever. He runs circles around his staff. And then the debate. And then it was like this massive dam-breaking moment of everyone who had been sworn of his strength. Everyone on those shows that said what you're seeing is not real. It's like they all got a group email. And now he's been such an amazing guy, but it's time to step down. This is just in the last 9 days. It's unbelievable. It is a moment of surreality that I just couldn't comprehend. And now they'll promote Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, into the big chair. She apparently that was at least the endorsement by the president. We haven't seen the president on video. Looking forward to having maybe a press conference of sorts. This is a pretty big announcement to really just only lie and exist on social media. Would love to see the man on camera and answer some questions about the decision and such. But I wonder if Democrats, if you're a Democrat, you love Biden and you were in favor of this. You were in favor of him moving on and getting out of the way, let somebody else take the reins. That's your decision. That's all good from my standpoint. But are you annoyed at the idea of potentially being told 6-7 months ago as primary voting began that he was good and 14 or 15 million people voted in that primary process? Would that primary process have potentially been different if Joe Biden was out of the mix and it was Kamala standing on her own merit? She's part of the ticket. She's the vice president, certainly going to be a massive name. And you've already seen kind of that transition. I think she's talking to the media later today. Again, all part of where real life has become a bit stranger than fiction in recent weeks. But if that primary process, Dean Phillips, a Minnesota politician, he was never really in the mix, but he had been putting himself out there in primary. A couple other names, admittedly, I'm not well wrote on all of them. But would it be any different? The nominee, the pledged delegates as part of that voting process. Are you annoyed by that, or are you totally cool with it? Hey, ultimately, they're going to figure out the right person, And it's just about beating Trump at this stage. That it's as long as he doesn't win, maybe you don't care if it's Kamala or if Michelle Obama emerges. There's a chance that this convention, again, stranger than fiction, like just the contention and those that will rise and emerge in Chicago, it's like still 3 weeks away. I mean, this is just insanity. I mean, 9-10 days of the nuttiest political insanity I've seen or read really in my life, it feels like sometimes. And the recency bias, of course, you can probably dig into the Nixon years and some other things. Of course, the tragedy of an actual assassination, what the world was like in 1963. I can't speak to that. So this is probably just the newest, latest, and greatest political craziness that exists. But this is just, I mean, it's breathtaking, it's sad, it's dramatic, it's scary, it's weird. And ultimately, at some point, we're just going to move into the 2024 election. Someone's going to win, someone's going to lose, and we'll move on to the next political melodrama. But this 9-10 day period we're living in. It's one of those rare times where sports is less incredible, less absurd than the reality that exists around it. So I guess in this case, it's good to cover sports.
Yeah, it really
It's unbelievable. It's so nutty. And more to come. It's not even freaking done yet.
Oh, it's July.
Yeah, exactly. So let's do this. Let's pause. Let's get back to news. Let's get back to sports, I should say. And we'll talk about, the Minnesota Twins, and then Joe Mauer in particular, dive deeper into that with Lavelle at 11. Vikings, of course, entering the training camp mix this week. There's a lot to talk about. And we'll get to all that around the corner. It's Nordo in for PA on the Fan.
Nothing, and I mean nothing, defines Minnesota quite like its 10,000 lakes, and we got to keep them beautiful. Post on social media using the hashtag #ChooseChill to help Coors Light, KFAN, and Conservations Minnesota protect the lakes, rivers, and waters we love.
I just got this text message, 64686, Bradshaw and Brian, KFAN text line. Remember the story about Joe Mauer recording rap songs in his home studio? Wondering if any of those songs have ever surfaced. We're on it, anonymous texter. We are on it. We need Joe Mauer rapping. And if I don't know exactly where it is, I got a feeling somebody listening 9 to noon does. Let's jump in. Let's jump into the news. News du Nord. Max's Meanderings is always brought to you by the casino at Canterbury Park, canterburypark.com. Live racing in play. I think they recently took like a week break, but they're back at it. And check the schedule in terms of racing dates and times. They have some 4 race day weeks, but poker, blackjack, table games in play all year round. Feeling the felt. Love Canterbury Park. Where are we headed to first, Max?
We are headed overseas to check in with Team USA, which, real quick before we do that, hopefully Joe Mauer's raps are a little bit safer to play on the air than Greg Olson's raps that surfaced the other day.
Really?
G-Rag?
G-Rag?
G-Rag and...
See, that's why, again, I would never just go off the cuff. I could, but I'm just going to start late. It's going to be a profanity-laced tirade.
Yeah. His was it was 3-6 Mafia like. It was very profane and a lot more sexual than I ever would have thought Greg Olson's raps would be. Oh yeah.
Wow, salacious.
Yeah. It's really funny. If you ever have a chance, anybody out there, go look it up. Team USA over the weekend. We almost witnessed perhaps the biggest upset in the entire history of the sport of basketball, as Saturday Team USA narrowly escaped a 101-100 victory against South Sudan. How
about that?
I looked it up. I think they became an independent nation in 2011.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah. Stories online say they don't even have a single indoor basketball facility in South Sudan. The program is in its infancy, and they outplayed the U.S. for large stretches of that showcase game, and the U.S. barely escaped. They got bailed out by a late LeBron layup Our guy Anthony Edwards wasn't too great. I think he was 4 for 11 or something like that. But LeBron James had to turn into Captain America and save Team USA from what would have been. I mean, regardless of the outcome, that's going to be a movie someday. LeBron might even buy the rights to that movie and play himself in the movie. But it's going to be a movie someday because what a hell of a story. Royal Ivy, former NBA player. He's the head coach of South Sudan. Former Timberwolf Luol Deng. He helped fund the program and get it started, get it lifted up off the ground. So really, really cool story for them, but just an almost utterly embarrassing moment for Team USA basketball.
Yeah, I believe there were just, 42, 43-point favorites in the game. Deal. No big deal. And I assume as you're winding down the tune-up period of time, the warm-up, that this had a little mail it into it, potentially. But how embarrassing would that? I mean, that is globally embarrassing. And what stinks is you're doing the balancing. It's like it's super cool that South Sudan is able to participate in the Olympics and that they are an independent nation now and they are growing as a basketball team. And the fact that the global game as it pertains to basketball has gotten so much more competitive in the last 5 to 10 years, you can't lose to those guys. You got to win by 40. Yeah. You got to put it on them. And so heroics to beat South Sudan was not necessarily in my pocket. I didn't have that written down as a potential note. We're talking about last segment, just real world can be more surreal than sports sometimes. Well, this would have been surreal had South Sudan actually gotten over the hump and finished it out. Still, ultimately winning the game, that's cool from a W standpoint, but Team USA, let's get ready. Let's get ready, guys. Let's get back on track, and they'll absolutely just stride through their group, I believe.
For sure. I mean, they lost to Nigeria in years past. I think they've lost to Australia in these showcase games. These showcase games mean almost nothing.
But they got out with a win. Yeah. Sorry, South Sudan. There are no freebies. Right. No freebies in this game. You learned a lesson. Don't get ahead. They were up by like 18 at one point. It was not 18.
It was
maybe
16.
It was like
16.
Okay, there you go.
14 at half.
So don't rest on your laurels, South Sudan. You thought you were just going to coast? Okay. You didn't see LeBron out there? You didn't see Ant? You didn't know? Fight to the finish. 48 minutes, South Sudan. 48 minutes. Go red, white, and blue.
Yes, sir. Down to Target Field. Reese Hoskins hit a go-ahead 2-run homer in the 8th inning to put the Brewers up for good and help them beat the Twins 8-7 yesterday. The Twins offense loaded the bases with nobody out in the bottom of the 8th, but couldn't muster a run. Joe Ryan, far from the only Joe that had a rough day yesterday. He got tagged for 4 runs in 6 innings of work. Buck homered twice in the losing effort, but they're back at it today. Bailey Ober will be on the mound tonight as the Twins host the Phillies at Target Field.
Yeah, and 2 nights ago, Saturday night, Carlos Santana with that 2-run shot to tie it. The momentum's the Twins and then they put up 4 maybe in the top half. Was that the 11th potentially? And then the Twins maybe got 1 back in the bottom half. Were unable to do it. The Brewers are good, and it was disappointing. Maybe it wasn't. I wanted to see. We had Pablo and Joe going in these games. We're fresh off the All-Star break. We're continuing to play the IL games. Now Correa. What's up with Royce? We're sitting there, and then trade deadline looming upon us. But 2 absolute, just thrilling, high-scoring games with the Brew Crew. Brew Crew's out in front in the NL Central. They're a good team with big playoff aspirations. I didn't see the run-a-thon that we saw in those 2 games coming, just because they were putting their top pitchers out there and we were putting our guys. And I figured they were going to be underscoring, in some ways, slogs of games, and we ultimately get north of 20 runs scored. I think, let me see, let's do some math. Like 20, 25, 26 runs scored in the 2 games. I'm probably still wrong, but that doesn't matter. I'm just saying, all the offense, I did not see that coming. But the Twins were on the wrong side of all of it. And Philly in town, as you mentioned. And the schedule is supposed to be, at some point, a little lighter for the home squad. The big games, of course, coming up with Cleveland. They still haven't beaten the Guardians this year. Division on the line. Play gets off according to everybody. So I was disappointed with how those games showed out, but at the least they were entertaining. My neighbor's a massive Brewers fan, so that was obnoxious. Can't talk to him all week, but other than that, it was fun. And my neighbor being a Brewers fan, He's from Wisconsin. He had Bally's at his house through a family hookup. So I was watching the Brew Crew call because I can't watch in my own city. Still weird.
Ridiculous.
Any other news bits?
Yeah, and of course with the Twins, obviously Joe Mauer got into the Hall of Fame over the weekend. We're going to talk to Lavelle about that around the corner. I believe that one of those Brewers games, I think it was Saturday's game, set the Target Field attendance record. So that's super cool. But another team in town also has reasons to feel pretty good about themselves because after he struggled early on in the Summer League season, Rob Dillingham put up 25 points and 12 assists to help the Wolves win their latest Summer League effort against the Magic. Dillingham shot over 60% from the floor and nearly 43% from three. No Terrence Shannon Jr., however, as he suffered a toe injury in the previous Summer League game against the Rockets.
Yeah, it was a cool way to end Summer League, and it sounds like I thought they were only supposed to play 4 games, and then they go, but everybody who didn't go to the playoffs got one final game. I think that's how it worked out. So, and final, I mean, what a way to end Summer League. The conversation over the last week and a half has really been Terrence Shannon Jr. looks ready, and and you mentioned the toe injury that he had early on. He only played like 7 minutes in that Rockets game, but then Dillingham, like, okay, might have a high ceiling here. Kid's super excited to be in the NBA, but when are we going to start seeing it? He was lifting off yesterday. There was, and I saw one highlight where he was actually being defended, I believe, by Jarrett Culver. Former high-end pick of the Wolves, and he just drained a 26-footer in the kid's face. So best of luck to Jarrett Culver, but Dillingham getting the better of that one, digging Dillingham. And the 12 dimes. It was 25 and 12, was it not? I think that's what the number was.
Yeah, 25 and 12, 60% shooting from the floor, 43% from three. So just an all-around, just rock star game from Dillingham.
No, it was a terrific night, and I promise I was listening, but I was also reading an email. I'm stupid because I mentioned politics on the show last segment, so I'm just reading through that, but that's all good. And then Joe Mauer in the Hall of Fame. So pumped for the Wolves. Terrific exclamation point for Dillingham, and now we get to rest for a month or so until camp begins. That waiting is the hardest part, but we'll get over it because we got training camp this week. And next segment, we're going to chat with Lavelle Neal III, who was out in Cooperstown as Joe Mauer was inducted into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. One of, I think there's like 60 Hall of Famers who played their entire career with one team, so it's not rare, but it's a special thing for Twins fans. But Lavelle was there for all the stories, and we're going to spend a large part of this final hour here just kind of celebrating Joe and thinking back to the good times with old number 7. But thank you to Max for meandering our way through the sports news, brought to you by The Casino at Canterbury Park. Lavelle on the hotline, if we can get in touch with him. Always an adventure during breaks trying to get Lavelle on the hotline, but we're going to do our best. Second hour ahead, it's 9 to noon.